So you've got your route planned, your campsite picked out, and your gear's all ready to go. You ready for your first backpacking trip. But what are you going to eat while you're on that trip? And how are you going to cook it? There are many things to consider when planning a backpacking trip. One of the first things you need to consider is what cooking method you'll use. You can either cook with heat, cold soak, or bring food that doesn't require any cooking. When cooking with heat, there are many different stove setups and several different fuel options. Some of the more common fuels include propane, white gas, and solid fuel. Fuel efficiency will vary from setup to setup, and it will vary with different fuel types. Some of the factors that can negatively affect fuel efficiency are wind, high altitude, and cold weather. When planning for how much fuel to bring for a trip, you'll need to consider the conditions and the efficiency of the stove, as well as how many people are on the trip, how many days the trip will be, and how many hot meals and drinks will be needed during this trip. There are also a few things that you can do to increase the fuel efficiency of any stove. One thing is to always use a windscreen. Another thing you can do to increase the fuel efficiency of a stove is to cook using a lid and avoid lifting that lid often to check the contents. Anytime you're using a new stove setup, be sure to try it out before you take it camping. You want to make sure that you know how the stove operates so you don't end up in the woods not knowing how to work your stove. I'll be demonstrating how to set up the MSR Whisper Light stove. This is very similar to the stoves that will be available for rent through MSU Denver's Outdoor Pursuits when the rental shop is open again. The first thing I'm going to do is get my fuel container ready. I've got my MSR fuel bottle that is designed to fit with the stoves that I'm using, and the MSR fuel that is recommended for the stoves that I'm using. So, open up the fuel. Open up the fuel can, fuel bottle, I should say. Alright, so I've already got a little in there. Put a little bit more, and you never want to go past that fill line because you need room for the fuel to expand. Once you're done, put the lid back on the fuel can, and now we're going to put the pump in the fuel bottle. So you want to make sure that this little valve right here is turned all the way clockwise, so it's completely shut. And then screw the pump on tightly. Alright, now that we've got our pump in, we're going to pressurize the fuel that's in the bottle. We'll do this by pumping 15 to 20 times. Keep going until you feel a resistance in the pump. Got to pump a few more times because my bottle isn't all the way full, so it'll probably be closer to 40 times before I've got good pressure. Now that I've got my fuel bottle pressurized, I'm going to set up my stove, lubricate my coupling, and hook my fuel bottle to my stove. So, setting up the stove is simple. It comes folded like this. Just rotate these little stabilizer arms until they lock in place. And set it so the cup parts are facing up. Now, this coupling will go into this part of the fuel bottle, and it's recommended to lubricate the coupling before you connect it. Your MSR kit should have a little bit of fuel cup pump oil. It also says you can use spit to lubricate, but given the current situation, I wouldn't recommend doing that. Alright, now that we've got our coupling lubricated, we'll want to orient our fuel bottle. So I'm going to rotate this. We've got a little hook that's going to clip to this part of the fuel bottle, and you want this valve facing up when you set up your fuel bottle. Alright, gently take this little latch, rotate it, and hook it into the groove, and your setup will look like that when you're done. There we go. Okay. You're gonna want to make sure your stove is sitting flat before you fire it up, because once you've got it fired up, you don't want to touch any of this because it'll be hot. Now that we've got it set up, gonna get our lighter ready, and we'll get our windscreen ready. So most of the time you're gonna want to light it and then put the windscreen right over it and kind of watch over top. For demonstration purposes, I'm gonna leave the windscreen off until I have it burning at the temperature I want, and then I'll put it over. Set up the windscreen, take it, unfold it, and then, here, we'll get our pot over here, set this up, nothing's on yet, but just for demonstration. So you're going to want to have it 2 to 3 inches away from the pot on all sides, so you can just kind of measure around your pot. And once you have that measurement, fold one side, and then fold a little bit of a crease. You're going to hook into that crease, take this side, fold it into the windscreen, and then kind of shape it and have it ready to go, so you don't have to touch it after you place it over your pot. So when we're ready, we'll have the pot on, and we'll just kind of place the windscreen down like that. All right. So, to light your stove, you've got to preheat it first. To do that, you're going to open this valve 1.5 turns, and then close it all the way. And you'll see there's going to be fuel building up in this bottom cup down here. You take your lighter or whatever you have to light stuff with, and this is going to kind of have a puff of flame, so just be aware of that. There you go. You light that fuel, let it burn off. It'll take about 2 minutes to burn off. Alright, and while that's burning, I am going to get my pasta ready, because as soon as I get that going, I'm going to drop my pasta in. So, I've got my pot, got my cup of spaghetti, and I've got my 2 cups of water. You're going to want to use 2 cups of water for every, roughly 2 cups of water for every cup of food that you're cooking. Alright, leave that off to the side. Our flame is getting close to being burnt out. Give it another 30 seconds. Alright, it's getting pretty low. It's about 2 minutes, so you're just going to want to take your valve, turn it half a turn. Alright, and so I actually waited for a little bit too long. I let the flame go out, which means I couldn't get the afterburn flame going. So now I have to wait for 5 minutes before I light this up again. So you want to wait to light it up again, because if you try to go right away, you can have basically a small explosion. This won't explode, but this will cause a very large puff of flame, and that can result in injury. We'll give that about 5 minutes, and we'll try to light this up again. Now that we've let the stove cool down for about 5 minutes, we're going to try to light it again. So once again, open up the valve 1.5 turns, and then close it immediately. You want to check to make sure you have fuel in the priming cup, and you want to check to make sure you're not leaking from any of the connection points. We've got fuel and we don't have any leaks, so we'll take our lighter and light it up. We're going to wait just a little bit for this flame to go down, and then we're going to open this valve half a turn. Alright, our flame's gone down just a bit. So now we're going to open this up half a turn. And we're going to wait for the flames coming out to turn cool blue. Alright, we've now got a cool blue flame, and we can open up the fuel bottle all the way. Now that we've got our flame ready for cooking, we'll take our pasta that we've already prepared, place it on the pot, place it on the stove rather. Take the lid for the pasta, our handy dandy grabber tool, place it over, and we'll take our windscreen, place it over the pasta, and finally we'll place the lid on it. Give this 3 to 5 minutes to let it cook fully. So I can hear that the water is starting to boil, which means I'm going to give it about 3 minutes while it's boiling, and then I'm going to turn off the stove and let the heat that's retained in the water in the stove do the rest of the cooking. This will help me to save on fuel. Alright, so the water with the pasta has been boiling for about 4 minutes, which means I'm going to turn the stove all the way off by closing the valve all the way. Don't touch that, it's hot. We'll let the flame go out, and we're going to let the pasta sit for 4 or 5 more minutes. Now that the pasta has been sitting for about 5 minutes, let's take the lid off and see how we did. You want to use your grabbers because the lid is probably still very hot. Alright. A little bit al dente, but pretty perfect in my opinion. So, you might want to let this cool down for a few more minutes before you eat it because it's still quite hot. And the other thing to note with this is that there's going to be a little bit of extra water in the bottom when you're done. Most people are going to suggest to just drink that water. So, you packed it in. Chances are you're hiking in Colorado and you're short on water anyways. You might as well take the extra hydration. And the other thing is you don't have to worry about potentially attracting animals to your campsite or pouring out all of your noodles when you're trying to strain the water. Now that you've cooked your meal, it's time to break down your stove. You always want to make sure to give your stove plenty of time to cool down because you don't want to ruin your day by burning your hand. First things first, take the windscreen and fold it back up so it fits in the carrying pouch for your stove. Put that off to the side, and next you want to detach the stove from the fuel bottle. Now this, be careful, stove might still be a little warm, but hopefully you've given it enough time. First, you want to release the clip, and then pull the tip directly out of the coupling. Try not to wiggle and twist too much, but a little bit of wiggling and twisting might be necessary. Now that you've undone that, take your stove and fold it back up for storage. Last thing you'll need to do is take apart the fuel bottle. So the fuel inside the bottle is probably still pressurized, and you'll always want to unscrew the top below eye level. Because it's still pressurized, it might spurt out a little bit and get into your eyes if you're doing it near your face. Unscrew the top. Put that off to the side to put in your carrying pouch later. And put the storage top back on. You'll know it's on tightly because when you go to unscrew it, it won't unscrew. Alright, now all you have to do is pack your stove back in its bag and you're ready to get back on the trail. It's also important to keep in mind the various cook times of different foods. Pasta, oatmeal, and lentils will all take less than 10 minutes, while foods like rice might take up to 40 minutes. The next option you have is cold soaking food. For this method, you'll put food and water in a container and let it sit for a while.
For cold soaking, put food and water in a sealable jar. You want to follow the general rule of 2 parts water to 1 part food. The oatmeal took about 2 hours to fully soften, the lentils took 5 hours, the pasta about 7 hours, and the rice never fully softened. Pre-soaking the rice did, however, reduce its cooking time from about 40 minutes to about 20 minutes.
Preparing food this way takes longer, so meals will need to be planned out several hours in advance. The third option is to bring food that doesn't require any cooking. This is by far the simplest option, but it can also be very limiting. The next thing to consider is water availability. If you're traveling somewhere where water will be very limited, cooking with water might not be the best option. This eliminates all cold soaking and most cooking with heat. Now that you've figured out how you're going to cook your food, you'll need to figure out what food to bring. The nutritional needs of every person in the group should be considered when planning on what food to pack. You also want to make sure that you don't bring anything that needs to be refrigerated. I like to bring things like peanut butter and jelly, tortillas, pasta, oatmeal, and granola. Bringing meat is fine so long as it's dehydrated or canned meat, and according to the FDA, hard cheeses don't need to be refrigerated, so you can bring those along as well. The final thing you need to think about when planning your backpacking trip is proper food packaging and handling. One of the most important parts of proper food packaging is animal-proofing your food. Anything with a scent, that includes food, cookware, toiletries, and food wrappers, should go into a bear can like this one. The lid of the bear can should then be tightened down and locked. And then this can should be put 100 feet away from your campsite. The bear can keeps the animals from being able to get at your food, and putting your food 100 feet away from your campsite ensures that the animals don't accidentally stumble into your campsite while following the scent of food. There are many other methods for animal proofing your food, but the bear can is by far the easiest and the most widely accepted. It's also a good idea to eat and cook your food 100 feet away from where you'll be sleeping that night. This also keeps the smell away from where you're sleeping. When you're done with your meal, there are a few things you should do to clean your dishes. Most people will simply wipe out the dishes with a bandana, put the bandana in the bear can, and call it good enough. That's a perfectly acceptable method. But if you've cooked something messier, or if you feel you need to clean your dishes further, there are a few other things you can do. You can also consider scraping all of your food leftovers from your cookware and your bowls into a separate container. Put that container in the bear can and call it good enough. Once you've done that, if you still feel like you need to wash your dishes with soap and water, there are a few things you'll need to do. The first thing you need to do is always use a biodegradable soap. There's no water treatment plants out there, so you need to make sure that the soap you're using isn't harmful to the environment. The second thing you'll need to do is to make sure that you're using a minimal amount of soap and water. Even with biodegradable soap, you still don't want an excess amount of it in the soil. When you're getting rid of the dishwater, you want to make sure that you're pouring the water out at least 200 feet from any water source. And you want to fling the water in a bit of an arc instead of pouring it in one spot. This will help disperse it and reduce any damage it might do to surrounding plant life or soil. Happy cooking, Roadrunners, and we'll see you on the trail.